Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Another day's journey. So glad about it and so grateful that you're joining us again for another conversation with Andrea and Alyn and Andrea, the truth. And it's just an opportunity for us to have a conversation. Most of you know that on Saturday evenings, beginning with the pandemic, I started doing something from my basement. And that was literally, I wanted to make sure, back then we didn't know what this thing was going to be. I wanted to make sure the people who called me pastor were still around. And so we hunkered down in the basement to have a conversation each Saturday night to talk about what was going on. At that same time, if you'll remember, when I got COVID, Andrea was on the radio and had me come on, first of all, make sure that I wasn't dead, because I got COVID when it was scary. Yes. And then we started talking about that. We started talking about George Floyd. Next thing you know, we looked up and it had been 5 years. I mean, we literally had a conversation about everything. And we wanted to keep this conversation going. I wanted to take my 5 o'clock thing to another level, to talk about what's going on in the community, specifically around voting and getting ready for the election. Now we want to have conversation about this good work that people are doing and letting people know what's happening in Philly. Sometimes, people will talk about what's not being done because they just don't know. They just don't know who the people are, what's going on, or how to help and get involved. So conversation tonight is with a young man that I love deeply, have a great deal of respect for, but I'm going to have Andrea introduce you to him and also what this conversation is about.
Good evening. Gregory Lamar Stewart, Sr., otherwise known as G. Lamar in my house. He's a young man that I met some years ago while he was still a police officer. And he was a police officer that was so different because he was in the community doing the work, sitting in the barbershops, talking to people in the communities, trying to find jobs for them, helping them do what they needed to do to move forward. About several months later, I called him and I said, I'm having Sunday dinner in my house. Would you like to join? He said, Auntie, I'm coming. And that's how I got to know this phenomenal young man that would sit at our dinner tables. He would worship God. The conversations were non-judgmental. And so when he came one Sunday and he said, I'm loving this idea of what you were doing. I'm trying to start something out in the community that's going to help people not only find jobs, but help people who are gun violence victims. What do you think? I said, oh my God, that's amazing. And then he called back and he says, Auntie, I think I'm going to take that Sunday dinner thing that you've done and I'm going to open it up. He said, what do you think? I said, go for it. Remember that? Absolutely. That? I am so incredibly proud of him. He calls me Auntie and he calls my husband, Uncle Mister. So you know how much he has been around us. And it is a great joy for me. I know he is Pastor Waller's favorite, but he's a favorite of many of us in the community. It is a great joy to say that I actually know this young man. I know his heart. I know how much he cares about people. And so today we're going to talk about tailor-made opportunities and this dinner that he has every Thanksgiving, right? I'll let Pastor Waller start because, that's his son. And then Auntie's going to jump in.
All right, you jump in. Well, that is true because I go a little farther back than the police force. I remember him in high school. And I remember him as another one of the churches around here over at Grace Baptist Church with Pastor G. Daniel Jones. His grandmother was one of the pillars of that church. But there's a revival that used to happen at Grace. Jeremiah Wright and I would do a revival, but I was always the youth night preacher. So, I mean, we're literally going back now 20, maybe even 20, 25 years ago. And the young boys and young girls kind of looked forward to the youth night, and I was young and so forth. But among those children was G. Lamar Stewart, Gregory Stewart, who was hanging out also with another young man that is dear to my heart, Tariq Craig, who literally in my head, you couldn't tell me that 15 years ago, Tariq was not going to be the next pastor of Enon. Wow. So these two young men, along with another young man, Stephen Mack, really are my heart. I believe they have my heart and head, and are doing the work. And that really is what Tailor Made. And talk to us a little bit about your ministry and Tailor Made opportunities. What's that?
Thank you, Pop, and thank you so much, Auntie, for the opportunity to be here today. So Tailor Made Opportunities is a nonprofit arm of the Tailor Baptist Church, 501c3. Our mission is to prevent and interrupt the cycle of violence in Philadelphia through mentoring, advocacy, development, education. And so MADE is an acronym for mentoring, advocacy, development, education. Most of our work is focused in North Philly and Northwest. We've done some citywide initiatives, but most of our work is in North and Northwest. We are focused in 4 areas. 1 is violence prevention. 2 is violence intervention. 3 is violence interruption. And 4th is support for those who have been impacted by crime. So whether that's a survivor of gun violence or a co-survivor of their family, those are our 4 areas of concern. And so we have a violence prevention program where we're going into 2 schools within our community to engage with young people right in the schools around Nicetown, and talking to them about choices, talking to them about bullying. We are kind of helping them think through the choices they make in life to prevent them from being impacted by gun violence or being impacted by the justice system. Then the next level is gun violence intervention. And so intervention, we have a mentoring program called Made Men Leadership Institute with about 23 young men who are enrolled in our program right now. And these are all young men who have been impacted by gun violence or impacted by the system. They're not knee deep in the stuff yet, but they're close enough to it that if somebody doesn't do something quickly, they can find themselves either perpetuating violence and wind up picking up a gun and harming someone. And so we're using a trauma-informed approach to really help them through addressing their trauma and addressing their exposure and connecting them both with support and opportunities. And then thirdly, violence interruption. That's our Corners to Connection program. And so we, every June, which is National Gun Violence Awareness Month, and every February for Black History Month, we go out on street corners throughout the city of Philadelphia, but mostly in North and Northwest. Every Tuesday outside of those months, we're also on the street. But for the entire month of June, for the entire month of February, we're on street corners with several churches. We have a couple dozen partnering churches, and we're out there with those pastors or with their surrogates, with their representatives and volunteers from their church. And we spend the entire month from 8 p.m. till about 11, 12 o'clock on the street corner, walking the corridor, engaging with those who identify with being a part of groups that are committing violence in the city of Philadelphia. And we're out there and we're talking to them. Our 5 pillars for Corners to Connection is healing, hiring, housing, harmony, and hope. And so our hope is to connect them to one of those pillars or multiple pillars to get them out of the life, to interrupt that cycle of violence in their life onward to opportunity. Then finally is that 4th piece, which is support for victims. And so there are a number of families who we call our tailor-made families. And every year for the holiday season, we do a pre-Thanksgiving dinner that will be held this year, November 23rd, here at Enon, Tabernacle Baptist Church. And we thank you so much for opening up your doors. And we expect about 150 people. We're going to be helping 20 families this year. 20 families during the holiday season. And these are families who over the last year to 4 years have lost someone, either a husband, a wife, a mom or dad, a child to gun violence. And we're going to create the Thanksgiving table for them right here. And then there are 20 churches who will partner with us. Each one of those churches will adopt one of those families for Christmas. And those families will show up to that church the Sunday before Christmas. And their Christmas wish list will be taken care of by that church. The church will purchase all the gifts that make it a little bit easier for those families who are dealing with the trauma, who are dealing with grief, who all of those emotions are coming up during the holiday season. So once again, our mission is to prevent and to interrupt the cycle of violence through mentoring, advocacy, development, education.
Who are you? That's no, seriously. No, it's a serious question, because you didn't just wake up one day and decided that this is what you wanted to do.
Right.
What impacted you in your life that brought you to this place where you are literally saving and interrupting the violence in other people's lives?
Certainly. So who am I? I'm a father of three. I have a 21-year-old son, Trey, who is a senior at Chestnut Hill College. I have a son who is 9, who's a 4th grader here in Philly, and my daughter, who's my boss, who's 7 years old. I'm a father first, but I'm a son. I was a grandson, raised by my mom and my grandparents up here in the Northwest. My father, my biological father, was in the game. He was in the streets, as well as my uncles on my father's side. I grew up in a context where, while we hear this phrase "credible messenger" thrown out there a lot, and oftentimes when we talk about credible messengers, most people assume that a credible messenger must be someone who went to jail, who is a returning citizen, and then based upon that experience, they now are credible. And that could be one form of credible messengers. But there's a group of us who grew up in Philly, whether it's uptown, South Philly, Southwest, North Philly, who may not have the story of we went to jail, but perhaps someone in our family was in the life. And that was, for me, my dad and some of the men on my father's side. Growing up here in Northwest and spending weekends down in North Philly, there was a group of guys, both in my family, but also who was just in the streets in the neighborhood, who, when I thought about going out to the corner, when I thought about kind of getting engaged and getting involved in that life, who would not let me,
Right.
who they themselves, they were in the streets, but would ask me to see my report card, would ask how's homework coming along, would ask, what am I doing to stay on the right path, who told me this is not for you. And so because I had credible messengers and I had men who were in my life, both in the streets and not in the streets, who were helping to keep me on the right path, I understand that you can take a young man who grew up in the hood, who grew up in Philly, and you can prevent them from going down the wrong path. You can intervene at the right time, or you can just interrupt that cycle in their life. And so because someone did it for me, I want to be able to do it for somebody else. And I want to add this, and I want to say this publicly while he's sitting here. One of the things that took place when my grandfather passed away in '98, I was 13 years old. And my grandfather was a major figure in my life to help keep me on the right path. Outside of having these uncles and guys who were in the neighborhood who may have been in the life, but said to me, "You're not coming this way." My grandfather was also that voice. When he passed away, I felt a void in my heart and in my world. And it was right around that time that Dr. Waller was preaching these fall revivals at Grace, the church that I was born in, that my grandmother has been a member since the 1950s under Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright Sr. And so after hearing him on the first Sunday of October, 1998, it was clear to me that this is where I needed to be. And this is who I need to be sitting under. And I needed a paternal voice and figure to help carry me into the next stage of my life. And so since 1998, it's been Dr. Waller who has helped to mentor me. And it gave me something as a young man that I needed. And so that's my why. My why is I owe it to another young man to be for them what I had through him, what I had through Dr. G. Daniel Jones, who was the senior pastor at Grace Baptist Church of Germantown, and other men of both influence and some men who was just in the streets, who made sure they were going to allow me to utterly fall.
Right.
And so.
Right. So you snuck out of Grace and came to Enon.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly what happened. So my grandmother would drop us off for Sunday school at 9:30. And so she would drop us off at 9:30. Sunday school began at 9:30, and we would get there about 9 o'clock because she was the head of the Pastors Aid Society, and there was a 9 o'clock service happening at Enon. And so I would leave out of Grace after she went in the door. I would run down Johnson Street I would make the left turn onto Wayne Avenue, right turn on the Coulter. I would go to church and then make it back because Grace had about a 2-hour and 45-minute service. So, and at that time, and I would make it back in time, and my grandmother would never know I was gone. And after a couple of years, I just said, you know what, I'm going on Enon.
See, I told you it takes a few years. Well, how does it make you feel to hear that story?
It's a wonderful story. I mean, I bless God for it, and that's what I could only hope for in the work that I have tried to do, investing in young men. And I'm really proud of him. And, I've watched the ins and outs, and, there's a whole lot to his story with the Army and Wichita and Fort Huachuca. That you were out in Arizona, and even the time you spent deployed. Absolutely. And how that informs how he's able to have this conversation. This country does not do enough for the repair of men who have gone literally to war, and who have seen. It's not natural to see what he's seen. Right. And even if it's on a battlefield and you come back to a battlefield, that's a special conversation. And so I've watched how you've negotiated that, how you've negotiated your call. And I'm just proud of you and appreciate the work that you're doing in the street, because not everyone can do this work.
Absolutely.
And that's a particular thing. My journey is a different journey. And that's why I'm focused on the little boys, 7 to 9-year-olds. And so I like to think that we have this tag team going on. Right. My ministry is with 7 to 9-year-old boys, and then they move on up. And so we keep on going up until we get them to manhood. And his conversation, I probably have more life experience conversation for the young boys who are in Abington and Cheltenham than I do Philly. My story being from Shaker Heights in Cleveland, I know that particular trauma and drama that goes with growing up in the suburbs, but feeling the pressure and call of the hood, and being asked for a fake experience. And so, I know that story. He has a different story, and you've been able to stay rooted in the church. One of the challenges of being Christian in Philadelphia, Washington Post referred to this area as Muslim town. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but there are a lot of Muslims. There are a lot of people who are really mad at the church. There's stuff that happened in Philadelphia beginning in 1960, when the argument that led to the split of the National Baptist USA of the Progressive from the National Baptist happened here in Philadelphia. And it ultimately came to fruition then in 1961 in Kansas City. But there is a spirit, I believe, that is here. And there's a void that was left, experiential void that was left in the lives of people that the church did not fill. Now, I know that the church is the answer, but there needs to be voices like Greg's that help people even do the special K with the church again, try us again for the very first time. And so in a non-judgmental way, the old evangelistic approach is to just tell everybody they're going to hell and we're the only way. This season is a much more nuanced conversation that affirms the humanity of everyone, but shows the light rather than bringing the heat.
Brothers who I've had the privilege of meeting throughout the city, but particularly in North Philly and Northwest, who, when I'm walking past, they're waiting for that conversation. And a part of this work of violence interruption is remembering their story, remembering to check in. Man, how's your son doing? How was your daughter's event? Were you able to follow up? How was parent teacher conference? And coaching them even through some of the challenges they're facing with trying to co-parent, with kind of dealing with dynamics with mothers of their child, trying to help them figure out, how do I work through wherever I am in my life, but also still stay, invested in the life of my family and my children,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And so some of those experiences that I've had has really prepared me, but also helped me to, even you talked about Iraq, the experience of being in a war zone, and understanding the exposure to high level of trauma.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what all that was about back then. But really, in this moment, while gun violence statistically is down, people aren't always feeling that. And being able to show up in someone's crisis, understanding how to navigate trauma, and helping them, find a sense of healing and wholeness, has been a part of the story. And so it has been an honor to be able to help young men and young adult men see a different side of the church, see a different side of the faith, and have very difficult, challenging conversations right on a street corner, so that those who are considering Christ, who are considering church, who are open to the possibility of seeing the church in a different way, that they can feel it, see it, and experience right there on the street corner.
Thank you for that. And I want to ask another piece here, and that is, you're pastoring Tailor Memorial. You're doing the tailor-made thing. You're sort of in this world, and you made mention that violent crime is down. Can you speak to how we understand when you say it's down? Telling the mother whose son just got shot last night, or that group of people who I think 7 people just got shot a couple of days ago. How do we understand those statistics? Is it really down, or is it playing with the numbers?
Sure.
And
that's a good question. So, obviously crime is reported. People call 911. Crime is reported, is measured in a particular way, right? And so there's a data dashboard readily available on the Philadelphia Police Department's on their website. That many of us who work in the space of, whether it's from a grassroots space or from a criminal justice space, we're looking at those numbers to see just how are we doing, kind of measuring how we doing. But most of that is reported crime. For the mother or father who lost their child, those numbers don't mean a thing.
Gotcha.
I spend many a days talking to mothers and fathers. This morning I was on the phone with a mom who 4 years ago lost her 2-year-old daughter in Kensington, who the anniversary of that death was yesterday. I spent last week talking to a father whose son was walking to school to go to Gratz at 7:30 in the morning when he was gunned down. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been working with a mom who, a 12-year-old boy who right there in Germantown at Crowson and Locust was riding his bike on his birthday at 12 years old. And a shooter was shooting at another person who was his target. Shoots him, but also strikes this kid. And he's the only one that died. For those families, for those who are closest to that trauma, those numbers don't mean anything.
Right.
I think that we have to work through holding two truths at one time. That while statistically gun violence may be going in the right direction as far as numbers, it doesn't always feel that way to those who are living in communities, particularly when sometimes gunshots are being shot in the air, or there could be a shooting where no one's hit, and no one calls 911. If I live on that block, I still hear, I still feel it's triggering if I've lost someone. And so for me, it's still, for that person rather, it still feels like stuff's out of control.
Right.
When I turn on the news at 5, 6, 10, or 11, and the leading story is still a bloody leading story.
Right.
For me as a citizen, it still feels as if things are out of control. And I think those of us who serve, whether it's in the pastorate, in the church, or in the faith community, or those of us who are in the criminal justice system, we have to figure out a way to be sensitive in our language while we affirm that numbers are going in the right direction statistically, that people who we serve don't always feel that. And how can we show up for them and be sensitive to where they are in their experience, while not sounding as if we are in any way arrogant or disconnected from the realities that our communities are facing. And because I have an experience of growing up in the neighborhoods, I've lost family members to gun violence. I know what that trauma feels like.
I guess we have one final question for you. You've talked about interrupting gun violence. You've talked about your own journey. And yet every day you're a part of this where you are experiencing people's traumas. What do you do for your own wellness?
I'm glad you raised that question. You know, it wasn't real for me until this year. I kind of felt like I've had a high tolerance for being able to handle and carry a lot of stuff. Losing my grandmother this year, back in April, I had to deal with my own personal journey with grief while also carrying other people's grief case, if you would.
Grief case.
It became real for me this year in a way that it had not in previous years. And so obviously, you know, therapy is something that's on the top of the list for me, with, you know, just sitting down and kind of processing and really getting all that stuff out. Also rest. I was not resting enough before. I'm really learning to take advantage of at minimum of 8 hours of sleep per night. When I'm not being awakened to go to crime scenes and other stuff that's happening. Hydration and water and proper eating. I'm a pescatarian now. And so really kind of, you know, focusing in on dieting. I need to get back in the gym. and back on the trail, but also, you know, spiritual wellness as well. You know, is important for me every Sunday. Before I'm at Tailor Baptist Church, I'm at 6:30 service here at Enon. Really just being poured into, and having a place for just my own personal worship where I don't have to worry about being the pastor, and I can just be a member, a spiritual son, and be poured back into. And so, and also let me just say this, you know, finding times for just work, personal life balance. You know, travel is critical, kind of getting away from the stuff of life, and really just finding that balance. Again, therapy, spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, and just getting away sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Listen, G. Lamar, Greg, thank you so much for sharing with us. And thank you all for listening. I guess one more thing, how can people support your ministry? How is it funded? Yeah. How can we help?
Thank you so much for that. So because I am in city government, obviously I don't receive any grants from the city. And I'm very intentional to make sure that we remain ethical in everything that we do. Yeah. And so private donations and those who are feeling, you know, just generous to give and be a support, folks can write a check to Tailor Made Opportunities. Yeah. We are located at 3819 Germantown Avenue, Philadelphia, PA 19140. You can find us on Instagram at We Are Tailor Made Philly. That's Taylor. We are Tailor Made Philly. So find us on social media, support us, and we'll see you in those streets.
All right. Thank you so much. So listen, you all, I'm going to ask that you would keep Tailor Made Opportunities in prayer. Remember that we are always investing in our community. Ask yourself, how can I help? What can I do? How can I be a blessing? Well, we're just getting ready to go to God in prayer. We're praying for all persons that are going to the pulpit on tomorrow, praying that the gospel go forth with power. I'm looking forward to seeing you all, and we'll talk with you real soon. God, I bless you and thank you for what we've experienced. Thank you for tailor-made opportunities. We thank you for what you are doing in the life of G. Lamar Stewart, for the Tailor Memorial Baptist Church, and for his unique role in the city of Philadelphia as he stands in the gap for our children. Lord, we come against the spirit of violence that is invading us, but we thank you that the numbers are changing. We thank you that we're at least moving in the right direction, even if slow. But God, we thank you that you are a prayer hearing and prayer answering God. And so we're going to stay in the fight knowing that you are with us. Now, as we go into the rest of our day, would that you go with us, stand by us until we meet again. Through Christ our Lord, we do pray. Amen. 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 Amen.